Okay, this is just a personal note here. I'm getting back to this reading, which I began over a year and a half ago to read this series and put it up on YouTube. And there's been a big hiatus here where I have not felt motivated to finish out the series. These are, I don't know if I'll make this into one concluding reading, which would be lengthy, or two. But this is the conclusion of Jack Frost. The end becomes the beginning. And I began in the Christmas of 2022 after I saw this series on, I think it was on, I don't know, Hulu, Amazon, or Netflix. Don't know which. It was simply called Jack Frost. And it was part of the Christmas panoply of and I was watching all the children's shows because that's what I wanted to do. And and then at the end, it was a great movie. And then at the end, I saw that it was actually part of a whole series. And I went back and started reading and so on and so forth. Mainly because I thought it would be a nice legacy for my granddaughter, who is now 8 years old. And maybe sometime in her life, she might watch her grandfather read this series, which I find to be a stellar, he coined the term, a stellar series. I really have loved it and continue to love it. And I might even watch myself read it. I don't know. Oh gosh. Well, as I recollect, Catherine was reading to Nightlight. And then she paused. Catherine paused her reading. What caused her to pause was the memory of that last moment with Nightlight. She would not see him again for more than 100 years. Shall I continue? She asked Jack. Jack was now crouched low by the fire. Yet Catherine noticed that a pattern of frost radiated out from where he sat. The room had grown so chilly that she could see her breath, and she recognized yet another change in her friend. Whenever he was deep in concentration or felt danger, he often brought a chill to the air. In one hand, he held Twiner the staff, leaning close to his right ear. His other hand rested on his knee with his thumb and forefinger extended upward as if pointing. A thin stream of smoke from the fire looped and spiraled to the tip of his finger, while another rope of smoke came out of his thumb and twirled up to his left ear. The smoke proceeded out of his right ear and into Twiner. Catherine had forgotten that Jack could talk firewood, talk to firewood, that through their smoke he could listen to the wood's history and stories. Sometimes he received messages from forests in this way. All trees remained connected, even after being cut or even burned. Their ash and smoke were absorbed by their still living brethren. Now she felt a flash of irritation. Had Jack even been listening to what she'd been reading? I'm listening to you, Catherine, he said, reading her mind. I'm sure, she replied tartly. I hope the firewood has equally interesting stories to tell. Not quite, he said, but still rather compelling. Did you remember what you needed? She asked. It helped a great deal, he replied. But now I need to do the telling. There are things you don't know that aren't in Mr. QWERTY's pages. We must hurry, though. There isn't much time. His tone told her that he had heard something important from the firewood. Are we in danger? She asked. The raccoon Turks are on guard. We are fine, he interrupted, for now. Jack so seldom lied to her, but Catherine felt certain the danger must be close at hand. He was choosing to take a calculated risk and continue to tell her what he needed to, so the telling must be very important. Indeed it was. Jack needed to tell her about those years he was gone. He needed to fill in the missing pages of his journey. He needed to tell her how he had taken the name Jack Frost and why. And so he began the story of Jack Frost. This is what he told Catherine. He told her the testimony of Jackson Overland Frost, as transcribed by the book known as Mr. Qwerty, to Catherine of Ganderley, December 27, 1933. The power of a nightlight is formidable, especially just before he is released from his oath, the oath to protect a royal child of the Golden Age. Once I had fulfilled that oath to the man in the moon, I should have become a star and joined my fellow nightlights as a hopeful but distant MIM, as a hopeful but distant constellation. In that moment of transforming, the power inside me would have become strong enough to burn the last bit of goodness that lived inside Pitch's black heart. Pitch knew this. He intended to capture me and focus that power through the ray of the relic weapon. He planned to aim the ray at his own heart and rid himself of his last weakness. I would likely have been destroyed along with everyone on the moon and quite likely on Earth as well. But I had already found you, Catherine, and with our kiss, I had taken a new oath, not in words, but in my heart. This had never happened to a nightlight. A nightlight cannot have two oaths, and so I began to change to become not a star, but something new. Unwittingly, I had thwarted Pitch's plan. No other nightlight has ever had the life I've had. The others have stayed with their child till that child was grown up. There is a moment when a child passes over to that different place, the place of grown-ups. From the time children are very small, they want to do what grown-ups do. The million small amazements that grown-ups seem masters of, to know how things work, how to get to places and somehow know the way back, how to read and write, how to button buttons and tie shoes, knowing when food is ready, and being able to reach the top shelf. They want to do this all. Finally, facts and knowledge outweigh the daydreams and fancies, and it is the nightlight's job to protect the wonder as his child wanders into this land of grown-ups. Protect the wonder. Nightlight's job is to protect the wonder that we all need to continue to cultivate. But I did not stay with my prince. By saving him from Pitch at the last battle of the Golden Age, I was forced to leave him. I could only hope that he had made his way with his sense of wonder still intact. So it was an enormous relief when we were finally face to face after our journey back to the moon. I knew for certain that my prince had grown up grand in spirit and wisdom, and so I should have joined my brother Nightlights. I knew our kiss had changed that fate. I was no longer a true Nightlight. What was I to become? To have no clue about one's fate is a strange and fearful feeling. I had no place in any story I could see. I could not be of the Golden Age, and yet I could not be human. Inside, I knew I was both and neither. But then my moon dream showed me another path. My moon dream was long and epic. In the first part, I flew up to the stars and my brother Nightlights and told them of our kiss. Remember that he kissed Catherine to free her from Pitch's grasp. They told me I must follow my moon dream and shine not as a star, but as a boy on Earth. And they swore to help me, and so they did. The battle played out as I dreamed it, as did my guiding Pitch's dark meteor to Stantoff Closet. There, my old friends, Petter, Sasha, Tall William, William the almost youngest, William the absolute youngest, the owls, the squirrels, the spirit of the forest, even the mechanical genie were at the ready to help if necessary. Also waiting to help was one more, one who is not from Santa Claus, Emily Jane, Pitch's daughter. Mother Nature herself drew upon her great store of atmospheric energy and fury to help fashion her father's prison under Big Root. She had already tricked her father into believing that she had caused the earth-covering storms to cut off communications from the moon to the Guardians in these desperate days before the Battle of Bright Night. But all the while, she was secretly helping them plan their rescue mission. Emily Jane could sense that her father's blood now coursed through my veins, sense that she and I were now bound together, almost like a brother and sister. It was in this strange way that I finally had a family, that I belonged by blood to others. The Guardians had left instructions with the villagers before the Battle of Bright Night. Should they not return from the moon, Emily Jane would be in charge of keeping Santa Claus safe. With the ground near Big Root still aglow from the impact of Pitch's meteor, Emily Jane gathered every citizen and creature together. She laid out all her needs and plans, her resolution bringing a quiet determination to all. For many years, Santa Claus has been designed to keep Pitch out, she explained. Now we must work to keep him in. It must be remembered that the man you call Pitch was once a great hero. He tried to halt the spread of darkness, but the darkness was too strong. And despite his desperate fight, it overtook him. Now it will be our job to keep that darkness contained. Santa Claus will become a prison for Pitch and for the dark that lives inside him. Only a place of great courage and light can fight this darkness. That place is here, and its warriors are you. The response was unequivocal. To the last man, woman, child, squirrel, and leaf, Santa Claus would do whatever needed doing to keep Pitch contained. But I knew Emily Jane was secretly hoping for more. She was hoping that somehow her father would find redemption, that he would win his battle over the darkness that had curdled his once noble heart. She wanted her father back. She wanted the one loving thing that was left of her childhood to return. Only through a miracle could this happen. But even before I was part human, I knew that believing in miracles was the beating heart inside every mortal. What keeps them going, no matter how dreadful the odds. As I left for the last part of my moon dream, the skies around us rumbled. Weather is often at the mercy of Emily Jane's moods. Though her voice was calm, the skies said otherwise as she told me, "My heart fears for you. You spared my father's life, and for that I am forever in your debt," she added. "You and my father are linked now. How that will evolve, I do not know. Will your goodness affect him, or will his darkness shadow you?" The sky cracked with a splinter of lightning, followed by a roll of thunder. "I will help you however I can, but now you must leave," she said more urgently. "Finish your dream. Disappear if you can. Don't let yourself be found." Then she placed one hand on the secret pocket where I kept the dagger forged from her father's tears. "He fears this the most. Use it. You'll know how and when." The look on her face was desperate. The strange storm, which came from no cloud anyone could see, grew deafening. I opened my cape and let the wind fill it like a sail, lifting into the sky. I nodded farewell, then left Santa Claus in a gale. Rain fell from the cloudless sky, and I realized that the raindrops were from Emily Jane. They were the tears she would not shed. I knew where I needed to go. The last part of my moon dream had shown me it was a real place, a farm, where a boy named Jack lived. Somehow I knew the way, and for a while I simply walked in the direction that seemed right. Sometimes I traveled by road, but just as often I walked through open country, sleeping in fields or woods. For the first time in my life, I did entirely as I pleased, but I did not feel lonely in the least, for I had myself, my new self, filling my thoughts and feelings. Every moment seemed miraculous. Sunlight on anything and at any time was an endless marvel. The golden wash of light that brightens treetops at day's end when the world becomes a twilight of velvet shadows and fading radiance. This became my favorite time of day. And when night came, I was happy still, for I could feel the light of the stars. I could see my fellow nightlights and knew they wished me well. They had, after all, given me my moon dream, and with it, my new life. And I could feel man in the moon, watching over me. As yet, I could not talk directly to him or any of the other guardians. My ability to send thoughts or read theirs seemed to be gone. My old powers were at their weakest. I knew not when they might return. These weren't human now. I could feel the other guardians too, but only vaguely. They were like the warmth of a story told around a long ago campfire. I hoped that my weakened powers would at least make it impossible for Pitch to know my whereabouts and for his soldiers to track me. These days and nights were my school, my playground, my always unfolding map of who I was becoming. Sometimes I ran with wolves till they became my friends. I traveled with bears and chipmunks, deer and elk, eagles, owls, bats, and moles. If it crawled, flew, dug, or ran, I learned its ways and its language. Wild I became, but it was a noble wild. I never killed unless to eat. I never harmed unless to help. I only fought to make peace, and every night I dreamed new dreams. Such a wonderful, terrifying, joyful world was dreamland. Oh, I loved to dream, since he hadn't slept before. And all the while I traveled closer toward the boy named Jack. Then one night I was woken from a dream by a dull pain in my hand, the hand that I'd wounded saving Pitch. Cold wind blew suddenly through the woods, and where I was camped. For the first time since my journey began, I felt unease. The wind was surely a warning from Emily Jane. The pain in my hand could only be a sign that Pitch was reaching out in some way. I stayed still and quiet. The moon was waxing, providing just enough light to give some clarity to the tangle that surrounded me. I heard a curious sound coming nearer and nearer. It was a heavy, constant flattening of fallen leaves and snapping of small sticks as if something large was moving across the forest floor. Pain in my hand grew sharp. I knew I was in danger, but from what I couldn't guess. It was then that I heard a sound, a voice. It is the Lermontov serpent. I spun around. A man, apparently made of sticks, stood no more than an arm's length away from me. North sent me, the stick man explained. He made me for you. He wasn't sure if you were still alive, but if you were, he thought I could be useful. My name is Twiner. Twiner? How Northy, I remarked. Is he well? The sounds of the serpent sidled closer. North is North, said Twiner blandly. If I may say so, I think you best make use of me before you're swallowed. No sooner did Twiner finish that sentence than he transformed into a wooden staff with a crooked end that very much reminded me of the staff I had in my Nightlight days, but less ornate. He was, in appearance, just a simple stick. I heard the crackles and crash of a tree trunk, and I turned to the edge of the small clearing where I camped. There coiled a most imposing creature. His triangular head alone was larger than I was. Its eyes glittered venomously, its long forked tongue flecked with menace. This was a serpent that was not to be trifled with. It lunged for me. I grabbed Twine. The fight that followed was full of surprise and interest. Twiner was no simple stick, and I discovered that I was no simple human. Together, we made a formidable team. It's interesting how much focus one can achieve when a 50-foot serpent is trying to devour you. I discovered that my nightlight powers were not gone, but had, how shall I describe it? Evolved? Yes, evolved. Sudden moments of invisibility, that was new and convenient. Extraordinary speed, very handy when a fanged mouth the size of a bathtub is bearing down on you. A wooden staff that could change form from one instant to the next. Sword, club, spear, bow. Most useful and rather fun. The serpent struck. I dodged. Its long tail cracked like a whip. I vanished. It bit. I blocked it with Twiner in whatever form my instincts thought best. After a few hectic minutes of battle, the serpent was tired, battered, and frustrated, while Twiner and I were just finding our stride. The serpent decided to retreat and slithered noisily away. I jammed the slim end of Twiner into the ground so that he stood upright. Why was the creature called the Lermontov serpent? I asked. Twiner became a twig man once again and began to explain. He was once an impressive human, an ally, in fact, of Ombrick Shalazar. He was the protector of the Valley of Lost Dreams. Pitch, however, turned him into a serpent, and now he haunts, or he hunts, the source of Earth's most hopeful dreams. Now he hunts the source of Earth's most hopeful dreams. I gave this some thought. You mean he eats people? Yes, Weiner replied. He eats people who have consistently good dreams. Did Pitch send him to eat me? Likely, yes, Weiner sat down. So did I. You have been dreaming rather loudly. You were easy to find, he added. The adrenaline of battle was fading. I felt extremely tired. My hand no longer ached. You should rest, said Twiner. I'll keep watch. And so I did sleep and dreamed, and all was well. Twiner was on watch. With Twiner as my companion, my travels became even more rich. North had shown his usual skill in designing this being made of stick. Since Twiner was made from the cuttings of warrior's willow, he had the valiant heart and protective soul of that most remarkable of trees. Through him, I learned the language of trees and leaves, of wind and rain, and all the natural world. These elements became my comrades and vowed to help me fight whatever assassins Pitch might send against me. But I was so enthralled with these days of just being that any worries about Pitch barely found a place in my thoughts. I knew now that I would have ample warning when danger was near. My left hand would be my alarm. Weiner called it a wound that bonds, because although this wound gave me notice of trouble, it was also how Pitch could track and find me. So yes, this wound would bond me to Pitch for good and for all. As we walked through majestic stand of chestnut trees, Twiner took my right hand firmly in his. I was made to be an advantage, he said, as slender branches sprang from the fingers of his right hand and twined firmly around my right fist forearm. I was surprised and a little alarmed. Your left hand is bound to darkness by your own bravery and compassion, he explained. Now your right hand will be bound to light by friendship and duty. Then he shoved the tip of his forefinger into my right palm and with a quick jerk broke it off. Yes, it hurt to have a 3/4 inch piece of stick in my hand. But before I could protest or shout, Twiner smoothed my palm with a cluster of small, vivid green leaves that now sprouted from the tip of his broken finger. "This will stop the pain and heal the scar," he said. Left hand, darkness, right hand, light. The chestnut trees around us began to sway. The rustling of 100,000 leaves created a rolling gale of sound that continued to echo from farther and farther away. Then the branches from Twiner's fingers loosened and receded. Twiner let go of my hand and bowed. "You are now connected. Every tree that grows." He kneeled at my feet. "You are their sovereign lord and friend." Wow. The air around us, indeed, the sky all the way to the clouds, became filled with drifting leaves. Millions and millions of them falling like snow for as far as my eye could see. I had not seen this in my moon dream, but it felt like a dream, a glorious dream. In the days that followed, we found ourselves in an increasingly wild landscape. The forests were ancient, dense, and enchantingly eerie. The ground was uneven and rocky, which slowed our pace considerably. We made our way through valleys so deep that at noon they were dark as night, and up hills so steep we often used tree roots like ladders. Found the land fascinating, and part of my fascination came from the unshakable feeling that Twiner and I were being followed. The trees would tell us nothing despite our asking, answering instead with the equivalent of muted laughter. When a tree's leaves wave slightly, or when you hear consistent creaking and groaning of limbs, and there is no wind, chances are you are being laughed at by a tree. They may find your clothes ridiculous, your hiking skills clumsy, or your yodeling off key. It is not cruel or teasing laughter. They are simply amused. But in this case, in these forests, we weren't entirely sure. Even Twiner was stumped. These trees evidently had an alliance with some being that set them outside of the general brotherhood of large fauna. The same held for the forest creatures. None would talk to me. I tried to engage in conversation with an elk, a moose, 3 bears, and finally a gathering of chipmunks who were obviously very amused by us. The only word I managed to pry from the most giggling chipmunks sounded like shadow bent. The word meant nothing to me. But Twiner knew exactly what it meant. The moment he heard the word, he transformed into a bow and quiver of arrows and instructed me to hold him at the ready. The chipmunk broke into laughter. "Twiner?" I asked, thoroughly confused. "Yep." "I assume you'll eventually tell me what shadow bent is?" "No need, really," he said in his usual dry as a stick way. "He stands before you." I looked ahead, saw nothing, only massive chestnut trees, ground, and shadows. Then something caught my eye, a shadow that was distinct and appeared to move slowly and gracefully towards us. First, I thought it was a gigantic wolf, but as it came closer, the shadow stood upright and doubled in height. "Aim at the shadow, please," muttered Twiner, as if he were talking to a not very smart child. I did as he asked, though I didn't feel that we were in any danger. There were no signs. My hand didn't hurt. There was no wind, and those silly chipmunks were still laughing. As I drew my bow, the shadow came ever closer. Stopped, and at last it seemed to come into focus. It was, apparently, a man. He lowered his black hood to reveal a most distinguished face and a head with a wild rage of extraordinary fur-like hair. I am shadow bent. No need for weapons, said the shadow man in a thick Carpathian accent. I am shadow bent, and I mean you no harm. From behind the tree trunks, a solid bank of hulking wolves now crept forward, more wolves than I could count or comprehend. They lifted their heads in unison and let out a collective howl that set my hair tingling. Then all the trees began to wave, and the chipmunks squealed. It seemed as if every living thing in these wild woods was signaling to us that Shadowbent was indeed the ruler of these lands. Shadowbent was a gracious host, took us to the crumbling ancient castle that served as his home, and made sure I was fed. Twiner took the form of a staff and listened to our conversation intently, never letting me set him out of reach. Despite its disrepair, Castle Shadowbent was a regal and fascinating place, set on the edge of the highest peak in the Carpathian Mountains. The views from its rooms and battlements inspired awe. A full moon illuminated the fog-shrouded valleys below and gave an enchanting shimmer to the untamed landscape of mountains and forests. After dining, Shadowbent took me to his observatory, where a large ornate telescope stood among the fallen stones and timbers of the castle's main tower. There were wolves in every room and hallway, pacing quietly, never taking their eyes from me. My men and I are forever bound to the moon, said Shadowbent, gesturing to the wolves. Queer wolves, I asked. Shadowbent smiled. Yes, but not the werewolves you've heard of in stories. He sat in a large throne-like chair that served as the observation seat for the telescope eyepiece. A dozen or so wolves padded over and reclined on the floor around him. We are men who became beasts to defend the weak. There are ancient evils in these mountains, powerful families who have made misery for generations. We are savage men who savage others. The moon gives us our power to summon justice. And he motioned toward the telescope. We've seen your battle upon the moon, your battle with the one called Pitch. He leaned forward. Pitch is not like us. He's a man who has become a beast and prefers to be a beast. He wants to stay a beast. Suddenly, every wolf in the room stirred. They all looked toward the same opening in the tower wall, snarling. My wounded hand clenched in pain. Twiner was in my other hand, fastening a thought as a barrage of black arrows came streaming at me. But Shadowbent was faster still. With a snap, he whirled his heavy fur cape up like a protective shield. Every arrow lodged in his cape and came no closer. Again, I'm saved by a cape, I thought, remembering Ombrick's cape during Bright Night. The arrows were only the first wave of the attack. Through every crack in the tower walls poured sword-wielding black creatures. Nightmare men, I shouted. The wolves sprang at them. Their werewolf fangs tore at the dark specters like razors against rag dolls. No sword made a single wound against the wolves, and the battle was finished before Shadowbent's cape could fall limp under the weight of the black arrows. Except for the muffled growls of the wolves as they pawed and sniffed at the vanishing rags of the slaughtered nightmare men, the room grew quiet. Shadowbent turned to me. Pitch will never stop. Imprisoned he may be, but he will send whatever he can against you. He will do you hurt in any way he can, so that you cannot hurt him again. Shadowbent yanked a black arrow from his cape and pointed at its secret pocket where I kept Pitch's dagger of tears. He touched the tip of the arrow to the pocket. There was a flash of light, and the arrow vaporized. But these will be his undoing, he said knowingly. These tears, the last bits of his soul, the only thing left of him that is human. They are the weapon he fears most. The wolves began to howl, but surprisingly, Shadowbent smiled at me. An interesting night, he said. I couldn't help but smile back. Shadowbent's castle suited me more than I expected. The tower where I stayed had only half of its peaked roof intact, but as with the skylight, it gave me the opportunity to gaze at the moon. My room was carpeted in decades worth of fallen leaves. Here and there, a fragment of a broken stone archway jutted up from the soft, brittle dunes of the leaves. The evening air was cool but not cold, and an easy breeze stirred a constant dry rustle of leaf against leaf. Twiner leaned lightly against my hand with his crook up and kept watch. We were listening to the leaves as they told us the history of these woods and of Shadowbent and his werewolves. They are tragic men, said Twiner. They have all lost their families to war, starvation, enslavement. Now they live to fight injustice. Yes, I said. And why did they fight to protect me? For a while, Twiner was silent, and finally he said, I understand the power of your dream. I wondered about this. Werewolves and men and families and myself. Twiner knew I was in a jumble of thoughts. You dream of a family you've never known, he had. They dream of the families they have lost. Your fight, they said, is the same as ours. I thought about that answer for some time. It kept me from sleeping. But as I looked up at my old friend in the moon, I felt him, if not speaking to me, then somehow sending me a feeling. The feeling that the leaves were correct. That yes, in the many past chapters of my life as Nightlight, I had fought for justice. But now I was not so sure. What I fought for was not revealed in my moon dream. But then neither was Shadowbent and his army of werewolves. This part of my journey was a mystery. As I drifted into sleep at last, the leaves said over and over, your fight is our fight, till it became like a song, and my dreams were gentle and my sleep peaceful. Shadowbent and his men would be our escort until I reached the farm I'd seen in my moon dream. I had described it to him, and he made a deep, almost amusing sort of growling sound. I know this farm, he told me. It is outside our land, but not far. We have kept watch on this family. They are very brave, very kind. You have chosen well. I didn't choose them, really, I admit. I just saw them in my moon dream. Shadowbent made the same pleased, growling sound. It was strange to hear a werewolf king laugh. It is a laugh you won't ever forget. It starts like a growl, but much deeper and slower. Then the steady rattle of the growl speeds up suddenly and stops at the high yip. Then it all begins again with a slow build. I found it to be at the edge of frightening. In short, it pleased me enormously. Again, I say, you chose well to end your journey with this family, Shadowbent said once his mirth died down. I told you I didn't choose them. Kindness can be like a compass. You did not know you carried, he said to me. You are new to being human. I've been human and beast. Trust me, young friend, you chose well. We traveled swiftly through Werewolf Valley and the Transylvanian forest. The werewolves moved on all four legs, as did Shadowbent, and their paws made almost no sound on the soft, newly fallen snow. I ran among them, marveling at their stealthy grace as they moved through the woods like a silent stream. Occasionally, I would use Twiner to pull myself up onto a low-hanging tree limb, and from there, I would follow the wolves from above, running and swinging from tree to tree. It was thrilling. I had never felt so free as in the company of these wolf men. My mind was at peace. I became a being of pure action and instinct. I forgot about my past and my future. I forgot about heartbreaks or duty. I forgot about pitch. I thought only of grabbing the next branch ahead of me and keeping up with my friends below. For hours we went on like this, but I had no sense of time or passage. I had not noticed that the sun had set and night had come on, and with it a heavy snow. But then we came to the edge of the seemingly endless woods. The wolves slowed, then stopped. Shadow Bent stood high on two legs and pointed toward a clearing up ahead. Through the snow, I could see the lights of a house. The windows glowed with warmth. The house looked like a tiny welcome ship in a sea of downy white. My heart brightened. I recognized these fields and house from my moon dream. Climbed down through the tree limbs and landed next to Shadow Bent, feeling genuinely sorry to part from him. You'll need a new name to go with your new life, he told me, and I realized he had never actually called me by any name. It was if Nightlight had never existed. He shook my hand. It was the first time anyone had ever done that to me. He shook it the way I'd seen grown men shake hands, but I was still a boy. He smiled at me and made his amused growling sound again. Within every boy, there is a man, and in every man, the memory of a boy. Time to make the memories that will be your compass. He let loose of my hand and gave me a gentle shove toward the house. Well, gentle for a werewolf king. So I walked toward the house I had dreamed of, the family I had lived there, and the boy named Jack, whose life I had envied. The werewolves howled as I walked away. They were saying goodbye. I took the last steps of my old life across the snow-covered field until I came to the threshold of what I would become.